Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Purple Ponderings with Pankaj. Today on our show, we have Abby Hosseini from Mercury Insurance here to join us in our conversation. Uh, Abby, before we get going, would you like to just sort of introduce yourself and help people understand some background before we get going?
Sure. Thank you, Pankaj. Happy to be with you. As you mentioned, I'm Abby Hosseini, CIO of Mercury Insurance. Been with the company for about 12 years in CTO and CIO capacity. We are a California-based company in property and casualty with about 5,000 employees, presence in about 13 states in the US. And we've been working from home since March. My background has been in financial services for roughly about 35 years, capital markets, banking, insurance, HMOs, as well as some high tech. And great to be with you today.
Thank you, Abby. And that's a pretty impressive background. Uh, just at the bat, I wanted to ask you if there's something that you want to share with the audience that may not know about you. Um,
Sure. I mean, personally, I'm an avid soccer fan. Uh, Great fan of the British Premier League, uh, and probably watch just about every game in the league. Uh, Also, a great basketball fan, uh, from a sport perspective. Uh, the other thing about me is I'm an avid learner and a student for life. Always trying to learn new things and never think that I've really mastered anything. So that yearning for learning and for growth is probably very germane to my fiber, if you will.
got it. And I got to tell you, you have a very impressive collection of books. I know you read a lot, and I know that. But just out of curiosity, who's your favorite soccer team?
Well, I have been a fan of Manchester United since I was 4 years old. But soccer is such a fantastic sport. I almost have a team for every country. Whether it's Germany, Spain. Uh, it's just the uniqueness of team camaraderie and the spirit of the sport that I really care about. So it's not about winning and losing. It's about being in awe of athleticism and the dedication to perfection that the players have, and also the coaching angle. Soccer, you can turn a team around based on who the coach is, and it is so important to look at the connection between coaching and the individual player, and the fact that in a team, every player has a role, and even though they interchange, um, playing your role is what makes the match, the game happen. And I always kind of translate that to business and how I build a team, how I lead a team as a coach, and how I care for my players, if you will.
Got it. Yeah, that's a pretty interesting analogy there. I have a little bit of a trivia for you, Abby, that I read that the number of teams in the world, the countries that participate in the FIFA World Cup, is about 10% more than the number of countries that are members of United Nations.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that is about, I think,
it is the world's sport, that's for sure. Yeah.
yeah, which means that people, don't care more about playing, and soccer is a bigger unifying factor than politics. You know, I just
Yeah,
find
and
that.
that's an interesting observation. I mean, a soccer game is almost like a United Nation. If you look at the highest grossing teams, players come from all over the world. From Africa,
Right.
Asia, Europe, South America. and they play as one unit, as the globe should be.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So, Abby, with that background, I wanted to start with just sort of getting your perspective on obviously you've been a technology man throughout, but wanted to your thoughts on emerging technologies, especially IoT, uh, given especially given your past, right? So it's been something of a interesting passion for you. Please tell us a little bit more about what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, Pankaj, I started my career almost at the dawn of the internet at UCLA, where we were Node 1, and we were really involved with networking in a grand scheme of things. And I think when you look at IoT, at the end of the day, it's the marriage of sensors and networking to build awareness, build the response system, and build services. Uh, so from an emergence perspective, I think things like batteries that last for a long time, standards like Zigbee, the ability to sense different types of things, whether it's CO2 leakage, moisture, security, those types of things are really coming together in a way that it's making life a lot uh, easier for everyone. And sensors are going to be everywhere, and they're powered by network and powered by analytics. Whether we want to call it AI or machine learning or algorithms. In either case, I think there's some foundational technologies that make, for example, IoT possible. And when you look at the possibilities from self-driving cars to sensors to drones to the ability to provide security and preventive measures, the world is, endless possibilities, if you will. Um, the linchpin of a lot of that is machine learning and big data. And I think, if we view that data is the next oil, I think, those who manage, control, and utilize that data could essentially create a lot of value for both for themselves as well as for the society. So I'm excited about these. I think, when you look at AI, for example, it's almost like the dawn of the PC era, where uh, back in the early 80s when the personal computers came out, they were viewed as immature and probably not as good as an IBM mainframe. But nowadays we cannot live without them, and they have transformed our life to a point where we now have a personal computer in our pocket in the form of a cell phone. I think AI is going to do the same. It's going to be a transformative, technology, and if it can essentially empower different types of experiences, IoT being one of them, I think we'll be a better society in many respects. But there's also dangers, that we have to worry about, from the abundance of data, from misinterpretation of the data. So getting this data into a cloud, getting it into a coherent system where it can be translated, it can be responded to, is very important. Otherwise, you'll have fragmented information that really doesn't add a lot of value.
Got it. Got it. So Abby, you mentioned that you've been there right since the dawn of the internet, as you said, and you're also a keen, as you said, learner and a student of technology. Wanted to ask you, so you've probably seen a lot of new technologies come in to the industry, but some stick for and are successful, like considered successful, versus some others that don't, right? So as a student, what are your thoughts? Like, what makes a technology stick and become more popular than others that don't?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, Pankaj, the technology has to solve a business or a life problem, if you will, or else it's not relevant. And I think we've seen over the years the vendor community basically washes their product with the latest buzzwords, whether it's if you remember ASP, machine learning, big data. Every few years there is some sort of a buzzword attached to a series of legacy products and incremental improvement. But generally speaking, I think technology, when it becomes pervasive, when it becomes consumerized, when it really adds value to the society, that's where you really see the benefits of it. We have been fortunate. I mean, in this IT industry, we've been fortunate with an endless array of innovation and endless possibilities. Sometimes hardware is chasing software because it can't keep up. Other times, software is chasing hardware because it can't be fast enough or do more. And I think this marriage between silicon and logic, and algorithms is very unique. It's an industry that it's not like no other, and it solves many problems. I mean, if you look at, for example, someone like Steve Jobs, transforming 6 different industries, everyone was transformed with technology, and now the marriage of life science, bioscience with computing provides, endless possibilities for humanity. So, from my perspective, what excites me is when I see the application of technology to either a life or a business situation. Otherwise, the rest of it is sometimes hype and the maturity curve that you have to watch for. I'm not a big fan of early adoption, because you end up with some bruises, if you will. But I am a fan of experimenting and tracking the evolution of foundational technologies, because they are really the heart of what makes solutions happen. And in that light, I always kind of open the hood, look underneath to see what the secret sauce is, and understand the value proposition for the technology before adopting it.
Could you share any, you talk about being open to experimentation, right?
Yeah.
Maybe can you share any specifics of an experiment that you did and you're really proud of?
Well, if I could take you back, I don't know, 25, almost 30 years ago, I was at a company where we did the first CRM as SaaS, and we did that with Siebel Systems. We had an agreement with Siebel to take their CRM software and turn it into a software as a service. This is a decade before Salesforce.com. And you can imagine, when you take the value proposition of something like that into the future, what might happen. Other experiments had to do with, looking at SNMP protocol, for example, where at UCLA, about 35 years ago, we had Coke machines where when they ran out, they would send a signal and say, we need to replenish the shelf, if you will, all over IP, and when you look at those kinds of experiments, 20, 30 years ago, and the pervasiveness of it today, you can see the world of possibilities. I also spent some time at HP, and a good friend of mine, Rajiv Gupta, who was at HP Labs, he invented something called web services, and this concept of walking to the side of the street and calling a taxi, or being able to order food online on a cell phone, or any kind of proximity detection or proximity services, was something that really was invented around 1995, 1996, and it was coming to fruition when I was there at HP, and we conceptualized a lot of customer service experiences using these kinds of technologies. But this is well before the era of a cell phone in everybody's pocket, and Wi-Fi in every home. So when you look at the ingredients of the technology and what needs to come together to make possibilities happen, you realize that it's a long play. it's a very long play, and you have to perfect certain aspects of the solution. And for me, I think looking at it in business sense means, I look at some solutions that, we have to be absolutely operationally strong because we do it day in and day out. And then there are things that we have not tried before where we want to be more permissive about mistakes, where we can experiment, where we can allow some failures to happen. And so as a business leader, I always have to look at my threshold for failure when I experiment, you know. And if, I've perfected something to the point where I really demand error-free operation, if you will, that's one thing. But if I'm looking at something where there is no certainty in it and, we can experiment with it, then, you kind of build some level of tolerance, some level of experimentation into the solution. But I think the heart of that is also learning. Sorry, my dog is coming over here. The
No
heart
worries.
of that is learning, Pankaj. In other words, you cannot experiment on your own. You also have to provide research and access the experiences of other people. Whether it's other people in your industry, other vendors, academics, to really understand where the industry is going, where the technology is going. So having a 360-degree sense around a technology is what makes the experiment really successful. Um,
Got it. Got it. So, if we apply that to, say, a new technology like IoT, right? Because we're still experimenting in the industry. It is early days, and we're trying to find the best use case and, like, how does it provide value and things like that. From your perspective, what could be one thing which you think is a problem today, which, if taken away or if solved, would help in the adoption or socialization of this technology in the industry?
well, I mean, I can think of two different, realities that, if they come to fruition, we will have, vastly better results. One is, the whole, notion of sensing, accurately sensing something, whether in insurance, for example, water leakage is one of the biggest, losses. And to be able to accurately sense leakage and differentiate it from normal use um, is really difficult. Looking at how to build an algorithm to detect that is really important. And I think if you extrapolate that to other algorithms like self-driving cars, how do you tell a human being from an animal? How do you tell a tree from a bicycle? And those types of things that have to be enabled by vision. Uh, there will be phenomenal if they can become very accurate in the way they do things. And the problem with some of our technologies is that we have what we call algorithmic bias, right? So when you add the algorithmic bias to these sensors and the calculations that go in, you might miss something. And I think to the degree that in computing we can get better at removing algorithmic bias and refining our calculations and algorithms, I think you will see huge phenomenal results from IoT, from sensors and so on. So that's one factor. The other factor is, I think, pervasiveness of the technology from the standpoint of information consumption. When you really think about, for example, in my home, I have different cameras, different sensors. On my phone, I have different apps. They're all disjoint. They're all separate. They have their own experiences, their own repositories. And I am left to consume, analyze, collect, and respond to all of these disparate sources of information. If there was a way to safely bring the information, aggregate them into a model where it can give me the information that I need without the clutter and the noise that's coming from the different aspects, I think we would be a far better, consumer of these technologies. But we're not there yet. I mean, we're at the dawn of these capabilities coming in a disjoint fashion, and someday I think they will come together in a model where we can really consume the data. We experience the same thing in, for example, network management, or system monitoring in network command centers, where you've got sensors and you've got a lot of tools to manage different aspects of the technology. But to this day, 40, 50 years later, we're still kind of yearning for an operational dashboard that can bring all of your vital information into one view. And when you transfer that to the needs for cybersecurity, for risk management, for, like I said, hazards, self-driving cars, those types of things, you realize that the trick or the secret sauce is what I would call AI ops. The ability to consume relevant data and respond to what matters without all the noise that could come from the different sensors. So I'm not sure if that resonates with you, but I see that as the biggest problem. How do you separate noise from insight?
Yeah, no, I get that. I think I heard two things. One is you got to be sure that the data is accurate, right? That's in that you're removing the bias. So great. I agree with you. I think that's a great insight and great observation. And well, hopefully, a lot of the work that is being done is towards that. I mean, we've spoken a lot, and even in the like the just a special, just take a use case of water leakage. Like you rightly said, there's so many different kinds of sensors that can detect that are picking up a lot of data. Um, but is there like a one thing which can just sort of cover all situations? No, right? So I don't think there is a way to. So I think there are technology improvements being made, and it's possible to be better than a situation where there is nothing, right? So I always look at incremental improvements also as a sign of progress, that we're getting better and better, and so one day we will be in a position where we could say that, hey, if you were to deploy the solution in a property, your risk goes down, right? And we have data to prove that the risk does go down and by so much, right? And impacts your underwriting and other aspects of the company. Um so we're like the students who are working for professors like you.
No,
In the sense
experiment.
that,
Right.
yeah, so we're getting in the university of life, I guess, getting
Yeah.
philosophy degree. Um, so on that note, uh, Abby, let me ask you. You've mentioned so many great examples and stories from your life. But if I were to ask you to identify the biggest achievement and the biggest learning so far in your career, what would that be?
Um, I don't know if there is a big one. I mean, I think generally speaking, marriage of technology and business acumen is probably the most critical, the most important thing. So back in my early days when I was a system manager and I, ran, hundreds of computers in a data center, I was in a nonprofit organization at UCLA and realized that everything I'm learning, everything I'm doing is not for profit, and decided that I really need to learn about the world of business. That's when I got an MBA and really studied business administration, and then marrying that together with your technical knowledge becomes really critical. And I think creates some well-rounded view of how you can put things together and move forward. Um, I view that as more of a critical skill, if you will. As far as achievement, I think from my perspective, I see my achievement from the prism of the people that have worked for me. the people that I have trained, the people that I have mentored. And if they succeed, I feel like I have achieved something. Um, and it's not just about me and where I am in my career or what I have done personally, but what have I have enabled for other people to do, which is really the job of a manager. The job of a manager is to bring the best out of every person in the organization and inspire, promote, support, and really be a servant leader. You know, to that end, I don't think there is an end to that. In other words, you can't declare victory because you always have, you know, high performers, low performers, puzzles, the things that you have to solve for. And that's where I get pleasure out of, and if I kind of look back in my career and look at the number of people that have started from ground up and where they are today, I think that is probably the highest achievement for me.
It sounds like, going back to your passion for soccer, like you want to be that coach who works with a team, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like that's sort of the role that you really cherish in vision, right? Where you have the players sort of working in a tandem, and you're sort of helping them achieve their potential.
Yeah, I mean, Pankaj, in our organization, I think I mentioned this to you. We have this acronym called DANCE, and D stands for data, A stands for algorithms, N stands for network effect, if you will. C is for cloud computing, and E is for execution. But E is the most important one. Execution is where it matters, right? So to execute, you have to have the right players. You have to have the right technology. You have to have the right partners. And you have the right vision. And you can take acceptable technologies and execute, very well, or you can take the best technology and not execute very well and still fail. So from my perspective, the human resources, the organizational model that uh, fosters innovation, that fosters results, without wanting to take credit for it, is really important in applying the technology, because nothing's perfect. Nobody has. It's not black and white, right? A lot of technologies are gray because it's subject to how you implement it. It's subject to how you nurture it and support it. So what really matters is the quality of your execution. And all I can say is, when I look at my career, I look at my accomplishments in the form of, did I execute well? And I think that's all I can ask for.
Got it, got it, got it. Very well said, very well said. So, um, moving on to a different, segment now, where we want to learn a little bit more about you, Abby. I know that this question was about how do you, what are your hobbies? What do you spend time outside of work? And I know you're a big reader, you're a voracious reader. You always have a set of books that you have to go through. But can you talk a little bit about are there things other than books that are your hobbies and passions?
Sure. I think the most important thing for me is balance in a way where I can have some downtime and I can reflect. So I wake up at 4 a.m. every day, and I spend a good deal of time doing my thinking early in the morning, and I retire early in the afternoon, and go to bed early, if you will. So there was a book by Danielle Pink. It talks about owls and hawks, and some people are early risers and they're really productive early in the morning. Some people are very productive at night. And when we are leading a team, we have to know who's an owl and who's an hawk, and really try to adjust our management style with them. So for me, uh, the biggest thing is that downtime, and I go to Crystal Cove here in Orange County and walk the beach. Most often by myself, sometimes with a business colleague or a business partner, vendor. and do the critical thinking, do the decompression, and get some, exercise done as well. Uh, that is critical. It's like, we all have this white screen, problem where we're constantly looking at the screen all day. And that is the one time where, I can really focus on myself and focus on, decompressing, if you will. Uh, the other thing is, looking at how your kids are growing, and fatherhood, which never ends, parenthood, right? Parenthood is, whether your child is 2 years old or 25 years old, you're never done, right? And that is my passion, being a coach to my children, being an enabler for them, and being a good husband. These are really foundationally very important to me, far beyond any other thing in life. And the balance of work and life, which this pandemic has really upset, in the last few months, um, really it becomes possible when you try to compartmentalize, you know, and
Yeah.
compartmentalizing work, technology, and life. And rather than saying I have a passion here or I have a passion there, I think I kind of view it as a series of passions or series of interests with the ability to compartmentalize across them, rather than picking a favorite, among them. So hopefully
Got
that
it.
makes sense to you. Right?
Yeah, yeah. So that gives me a sense of how you spend the time. When it comes to, I wanted to ask you, uh, books and publications, right? You keep yourself updated with what's
Yep.
going on in the business and technology world. So, what are the books or magazines that or online forums that you go to keep yourself fresh?
Sure. Every morning when I fire up my browser, it starts about 15 different pages, and these are the areas of interest that I have. So whether it's New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Guardian, uh, different media, as well as, other, news articles and so on. But the one that I really like the most is, two publications that my kids introduced to me. One is called The Medium, and you can look that up. It's, I think, a site that was created by one of the founders of Twitter,
Yeah.
and it provides non-syndicated content. So you can imagine, there are millions of people who can take a concept and write a very short digest of that concept, or have some best practices and what have you. So Medium allows you to take the channels of interest that you have, subscribe to them, and then you get all these short articles from non-syndicated journalists about any topic that you're interested in, whether it's artificial intelligence or product management or health or what have you. And it's a fascinating place to really learn without the hype. You know, the other one is a site called Morning Brew, and Morning Brew essentially digests what's happening or what happened yesterday across a series of dimensions that you might have an interest in. So I think I use those two instead of watching CNN or Bloomberg or some of the other uh, things. But I also check Harvard Business Review, MIT, Sloan Management articles. I am avid reader of research from both insurance research companies as well as the likes of Gartner, and subscribe to a lot of different areas of interest like AI. And these digests that come in, result in reading, which I do at 4 a.m., for the most part. Uh, I think at the end of the day, you could be distracted by noise and news, or you could really focus on the things that you really care about. And there's only 24 hours a day, right? So
Right, right.
you have to be selective about what you're doing. One of the other things I do, which might be interesting to your audience, is I work with my team to pick a concept and become a master at it. So we have this thing called the IT town hall at Mercury every Friday afternoon. It's similar to the Google Talk, where the employees come together and we have a presentation or a topic. I think you have participated in one of them yourself, and that forces us to go learn something new. For example, we wanted to research the ethical aspects of artificial intelligence. Then I tap a couple of people on the shoulder and say, here's all the material I have, and here's all the other places where I don't have time to go read. Why don't you go and research it and come back with a presentation? That kind of promotes a sense of growth mindset in team members, but it also makes us smarter over time, because if I can launch 10 of these, then we get insights from different folks and also add some flavor to the rigor or the routine of each employee. Uh, that I find that fascinating because it accelerates learning, you know, rather than sitting down and reading. The last thing I wanted to mention is, when I'm driving, for example, I cue a YouTube video. I'm not watching the video, but I'm learning. I could be listening to rock music, which is quite pleasing, but I would rather learn something new. So there's so much content out there. You can save it for later, and then when you're walking, when you have downtime, just play it in the background, you know, and learn from it. And I think that could be the same for music, for interviews, for insights. It's never been this possible, for humanity to plug into their interests.
Right,
You
right.
know, so we live in very exciting times, from the standpoint of following our passion. And like I said, every hour of the day is one where you can essentially gain some insights, and whether it's the internet or other forms of media, uh, I try to leverage them far more than say a TV, where uh, I have to sit through all those ads. So
Yeah, no, that's very, very, very comprehensive peek into all your data sources that keep you keep you going. I did want to put in a plugin for Morning Brew, which I also accidentally discovered a few months ago. And what I like about it is that it's got the news, but there's a dash of humor as well, right? And we need, especially these times, right? It's just you need a chuckle or two, right, to get you going. And so that's something that I also you liked about them. Uh, so Abby, one of the things I always ask is, uh, if you were to listen to a future episode of this podcast, uh, who would be some guest that you would like to, have us interview, right, and have their be interested in hearing what they have to say about anything? What would be some guests that come to your mind?
well, germane to you and your passion, I think I would highly benefit from people who are building these sensors, and they're creating the IoT capabilities, and the challenges they have, the promises that they have, and the capabilities that they're putting together. Because it is still a black art, when you marry, whether it's chemistry or other sciences with computing. Um, it is still a big puzzle for me. So if you were to bring in an engineer that could talk through, for example, how do you detect moisture, or how do you detect leak, water leak, that would be really amazing. Uh, the other area I think generally is algorithms. Algorithms, whether it's lidar, for example, or aerial imagery, or capabilities for analyzing large amounts of data. Those all are of very high interest. But I also have a passion for business, so bringing business speakers. bringing management gurus, bringing people that have insight into the human psyche is of interest to me as well. So I think you're in a lucky spot because you have a world of choices there.
Thank you. No, those are great different options. I didn't want to mention that we did have a couple of uh, device makers, founders, on this episode. So I'll send the links back to you. But I hear you. I'll try to get those, the technology and the management specialists as well.
Right.
All right. So with that, we segue into the very last section, which is really just I'm gonna give you a couple of choices, Abby, and I want you to pick one of the
Sure.
two and tell us why you selected that choice. And to get going, let me just start with, since you're an avid reader, right? Are you a paper book person or an ebook person?
Definitely ebook. All audiobooks. I think I lose it if I have to page through, paper. Yeah.
Got it, got it, got it. Uh, this is a good one, man. Basketball or soccer?
Uh, that's a tough one. It it really depends on the quality of the league and the magnetism of the athletes. Uh, I think basketball is much more rewarding to watch because you got so many scores happening and so much athleticism and amazing last minute things that happen in basketball. Uh, so if I were to make a choice about adrenaline rush and what you get out of the sport, uh, I think basketball is probably trumping soccer. Uh, but soccer is a sport that has a lot to offer as well because, like I said, you have players that play a very particular role and you have tactics that are really important.
Got
So
it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm torn between the two.
Yeah, I didn't get an answer. That's the answer.
Right? Yeah.
Both that's kind of a toss up. But all right. What about Superman or Spider Man?
Superman, definitely. Uh, yeah. I
Why?
think, well, because the speed with which he can get to where he needs to go to make something happen. You know, I think the power to be late but still get there, to interject or intercept and provide inertia to change direction of an event is phenomenal. You know, and I think every time I see Superman do that, I realize that is probably the best, uh, you know, superpower that anybody can have.
Got it. Got it. Star Trek from the 70s or Avengers, more recently?
It's definitely Star Trek from the 70s, for nothing other than the fact that if somebody back in 1969 thought about, transplanting or teleporting or talking to computers, you know, that is really far out there. I mean, they had a guy called Mr. Data, if you remember, one of the
Yeah.
authors. And this is before data became mainstream, right? So I think there's a lot of foundational insights in Star Trek.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to tell you, this was used to be like, I'm talking about the original Star Trek series, right? And think about that. I was amazed as a kid. And I think everything that they showed in that series has come out to be true. I'm just waiting for, beam me live, Scotty. So that's the only thing that is remaining, but everything else and speaking to their watches and sort of, communication, it's unbelievable. You're absolutely right. It's just amazing how talented they were. And finally, um, uh, Iceland or Hawaii for vacation.
I have not been to Iceland. When it comes to Hawaii, I mean, I am spoiled to live in Southern California, particularly in Orange County, which quite honestly is a little like Hawaii. You know, if you go to
Yeah.
Laguna Beach or San Diego and what have you. Um, so Hawaii doesn't impress me other than the fact that it forces you to kind of lose a couple of cylinders and slow down. Um, that's really the experience, if you will. Iceland, I think, would be fascinating. Would be fascinating to go because it's still kind of a pristine, uncharted territory. So I would take Iceland, but I'm not a big fan of cold weather. Um, I don't think I'll last in Buffalo, New York, for example, for a day. So,
Yeah, yeah. You wanna experience Iceland, you can just watch Game of Thrones.
yeah.
You get a feel for it.
Right. One interesting tidbit: I did work in Norway for a while, but I made
Oh,
sure that I go there in summertime. So,
got it, got it, got it. Well, with that, Abby, we come to an end of this episode. This was a great conversation, and so before we wrap up, any final words that you want to share with the audience?
well, I think I want to thank you for the opportunity to connect with you, and really enjoyed this discussion. Um, I can't help but wish you and your family a safe passage through this pandemic. Wish all of us safe passage through this pandemic, and happy holidays. Um, and
Yeah,
really hope and wish for a better 2021.
thank you, Abby, and wishing you the same as well. And happy holidays, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and 2021 will be different, exciting. So hoping on that count. You're signing off for this episode of Purple Ponderings. We'll be back very soon with another guest. Till then, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye.